Hello and welcome to Carmen Miller's Talk of the Town, Fort Mill, Tega Cay. I'm your host, Patty Mercer, here in Fort Mill at an RFATS meeting to find out how to make transportation even better. So let's walk a little bit for maybe those that are watching this who are not familiar with RFATS. What does the acronym stand for?
It stands for Rock Hill Fort Mill Area Transportation Study.
And the goal?
The goal is, and if I can kind of refer to the map here, when an area becomes sufficiently urbanized, which means you essentially have a population of 50,000 or greater, the federal government says we want you to establish a special purpose planning agency that focuses on land use and transportation and the important connection, and that's what RFATS does.
So what are you doing here?
I'm on the Citizens Advisory Committee for RFATS.
Okay.
And part of what we do as the Citizens Advisory Committee, try to find out what's going on, and we try to spread that information to other people in our communities.
Now you're representing Tega Cay tonight?
Tega Cay, yes.
Okay. So the public input meeting is about Rock Hill, Fort Mill, Tega Cay, and all about transportation. So from Tega Cay's perspective, what are you seeing on the proposals that RFATS has put together?
Well, we have traffic. Everybody has traffic.
Yeah, well, you got a lot right there at the intersection of 160 and Gold Hill Road.
And they're actually working on that now.
Okay.
And they should, hopefully, I think by 2018, they should have that intersection done. This is the RFATS area.
Okay.
It includes Tega Cay, Fort Mill, Rock Hill, part of Clover over here, and part of Lancaster County over here. This is the panhandle of Lancaster County.
Which is booming.
Which is booming.
Right.
And it's growing so rapidly, that's why they added it into the RFATS area. Mm-hmm. And the RFATS is being a grouping like this. RFATS gets money, and they decide where the money goes.
Because it's federally mandated money
some of it
and
is federally mandated
state
money, yes.
Okay, gotcha.
Most of it is federally mandated that we deal with.
This tonight, we're talking 25 years into the future. That's a long time.
Yes, it is, and we need to be looking out that far ahead, because if you go 20 years back, many would say, if I go back and think of Celanese as a 2-lane road, I have a hard time, as I look at it as a 7-lane facility, kind of imagining what that was like. Mm-hmm. And people would say the same thing about 160 and Gold Hill Road. So we want to start asking those longer range questions of not just where we're at now, but as we look at announced activity and other areas where there's developable land, are we making the right connection and saying these are corridors we want to highlight and focus on and monitor over time so we can be as proactive as we can be?
Being on the advisory board and representing Tega Cay, how many times do you attend meetings? How many RFATS meetings such as tonight do they hold?
Well, RFATS, the committee meets once a month, with the exception, I think, of the summer months. And our committee meets 4 times a year. And we basically review kind of what's coming up at the next meeting of the total RFATS committee.
Transportation and roads, that seems to be the number one complaint in areas such as Fort Mill, such as RFATS that are experiencing growth. It's also kind of confusing to follow because we've got RFATS, we've got Pennies for Progress, we've got different municipalities, looking at projects to better improve transportation. How does RFATS fit into the existing programs that we have?
Oh, certainly. RFATS, let me kind of take a step back. You talked about pennies in some of the municipalities. The first thing that's important to note is that the funding sources are different. The local municipalities are bringing local funds to the process. Pennies is also bringing local funds to the process, but they do it on a county-wide basis. RFATS supplements those two efforts by bringing in federal resources and bring an expanded planning process that says, let us look at not just more immediate needs in terms of congestion, but let's kind of expand that and look at some of the things you mentioned, freight movement in the area, impacts to air quality, current development activity, projected activity, what types of roads are going to rise and need attention in the years ahead, and so it kind of supplements what you see going on locally.
There seems to be a lot of checks and balances. I mean, especially when you are putting together a potentially 30-year plan, every opportunity to get public input seems to be in place. Have you been impressed with the transparency of RFATS?
Yes. The problem that we have is we don't get enough people to come to meetings like this.
And what is the next step? Once you have collected public input, what's the next step?
Certainly, we'll take all of this input back to the region's elected officials, which is the RFATS Policy Committee, and we'll identify what parts of the transportation network have been highlighted, where people think an additional focus needs to be. We'll then take all that information and put that on one comprehensive list, and then we'll objectively rank that. We'll look at, again, those trends we talked about earlier. There's a process we use called a regional travel demand modeling process, and it kind of looks at current operations and projected operations and says, what kind of changes are we going to see? And then we'll cross-reference that with the input we received as a way to say, these are the areas that have been highlighted, here's some of the operational data, and see how it works together to say, yes, you need to be focusing on these key areas within the transportation network. They'll evaluate that. They'll ask staff to go back and run a couple of scenarios to say, if you widen a roadway here, if you do some work here, how will they work together?
Right.
Because when you do something on one roadway, it affects the adjacent roadways. There are ripple effects.
Absolutely.
And so they're going to want us to look at that and provide additional feedback to them as they continue evaluating the projects before they ultimately decide on a set list where they want to focus their resources.
And then we've got pennies for progress projects.
Pennies for projects, that's the county voted to tax itself
1 cent.
1 cent on sales tax, and that's the money where we get a lot of the roads and a lot of the stuff done in here. As you can see, all these red ones are pennies for progress.
Wow.
Examples here. This is all done. If we didn't have pennies for progress, none of these would get done.
And what I love about it, the pennies is unique to York County, and yet we have seen the success of just what 1 cent can do in terms of helping us take ownership. I mean, it's kind of like the projects on Pennies for Progress, they're paid for before they ever get started.
Exactly.
The projects that we're looking at tonight are not paid for yet.
Are not paid for yet. Tonight what we're trying to do is get public influence or information on what the public thinks of where we need help.
We absolutely want the public to comment. We want to know what your experience is, whether it's related to traffic congestion or there are areas where you have safety concerns. If you want perhaps an increased focus on sidewalks or trails, in addition to focusing on the roadways for congestion, we need to hear that from you.
Right. Well, that's it for this edition of Carmen Miller's Talk of the Town, Fort Mill, Tega Cay. To see more beautiful homes in our area, simply go to homesfortmill.com. But if you want to get involved about transportation, simply go to an RFATS meeting and learn what it's all about. Until next time, this is Patty Mercer. Bye-bye.